Chapter 5, The Main Motion. 10. The main motion. As explained in chapters 3 through 6, a main motion is a motion whose introduction brings business before the assembly. Such a motion can be made only while no other motion is pending. Distinction between original main motions and incidental main motions. The division of main motions into original and incidental main motions was mentioned in chapter 6 and is discussed below. An original main motion is a main motion that introduces a substantive new question as a new subject. This is the motion most often used, and is the basic device by which a matter is presented to the assembly for possible action, as that the club contribute $50 to the centennial celebration, or that the society go on record as favoring the popular run route for the proposed new beltway, or to adopt the following resolution: resolve that the Northridge Improvement Association oppose a municipal tax increase at this time. It may be more suitable for an original main motion to be made orally, or to be submitted in writing, depending on its length, complexity, or importance. See Making a Motion 4.4 through 5, where many of the statements especially apply to original main motions. An incidental main motion is a main motion that is incidental to or relates to the business of the assembly or its past or future action. Such a motion is distinguished by the following characteristics. 1. It proposes an action specifically defined under parliamentary law and described by a particular parliamentary term. There are thus a definite number of incidental main motions, somewhat as in the case of the secondary motions, subsidiary, privileged, incidental, and the motions that bring a question again before the assembly. 2. It does not mark the beginning of a particular involvement of the assembly in a substantive matter, as an original main motion does. Like all main motions, however, it can be made only when nothing is pending and it brings business before the assembly. Action that can be proposed by the incidental main motions may relate A. to further steps in dealing with a substantive matter in which the assembly's involvement has begun earlier, or B. to procedure, without direct reference to a particular substantive item of business. An incidental main motion involving a subject already entered into might be a motion to adopt recommendations, which a committee has prepared upon instructions not relating to a referred motion, or a motion to ratify action taken at a meeting when no quorum was present. An example of an incidental main motion relating to procedure without reference to an item of business would be a motion to take a recess, made when no business is pending, or a motion to place a special limit on the length of speeches throughout a meeting. In each of the examples just mentioned, the emphasized word, adopt, ratify, limit, recess, is the parliamentary term that describes the motion. An incidental main motion is usually made orally. The chief difference in the rules governing original and incidental main motions is that an objection to the consideration of a question, chapter 26, can be applied only to original main and not to incidental main motions. The reason is that, in the case of an incidental main motion dealing with a subject previously entered into, the involvement has already begun and it is too late to object. And in the case of an incidental main motion involving only procedure, an objection to its consideration has no legitimate purpose. In conventions, incidental main motions are not referred to as resolutions committee, 5967 and following. Most of the incidental main motions closely correspond to secondary, subsidiary, privileged, or incidental motions described by the same or similar names, as in the last two of the four examples above. Compare the subsidiary motion to limit or extend limits to debate, chapter 15, and the privileged motion to recess, chapter 20. Referring to the table of rules relating to motions on pages T6 through T33, most of the motions listed as main, with the exception of number 1, original main motion, are incidental main motions in their usual application. The motions to adopt and to ratify are briefly discussed at the end of this chapter. Standard descriptive characteristics. A main motion, 1, takes precedence of nothing, that is, it cannot be moved when any other question is pending. It yields to all subsidiary, all privileged, and all applicable incidental motions, that is, any subsidiary or privileged motion and any incidental motion that is applied in the particular case at the particular time can be moved while a main motion is pending. 2, can be applied to no other motion. All subsidiary motions can be applied to it. If it is postponed to a certain time or later in the table, it carries with it any subsidiary motions that may also be pending. If it is referred to a committee, the only subsidiary motions that it carries with it to the committee are pending amendments, so that a motion to postpone indefinitely, if pending, is dropped. An objection to the consideration of a question can be applied only to an original main motion, not to an incidental main motion. 3 is out of order when another has the floor. 4 must be seconded. 5 is debatable. 6 is amendable. 7 requires a majority vote except A, when the motion proposes an action for which the bylaws or special rules of order prescribe some other requirement, such as a 2/3 notice or a previous notice, C 1044 through 51, or both. For example, where the organization's bylaws require greater than a majority vote for motions proposing admission of membership, the purchase or sale of real estate, etc. B, when adoption of the motion would have the effect of suspending a rule of order or parliamentary right of members, in which case it requires a 2/3 vote, as, for example, a motion to place a special limit on the length of number of speeches per member during a meeting or session, or C, when adoption of the motion would have the effect of changing something already adopted, as in a motion to postpone an event previously scheduled by a vote of the Assembly or to discharge a committee from an uncompleted task previously assigned to it by means of a main motion before the committee is ready to report, in which case the vote required is as stated in 35.2 under standard characteristic 7 of the motion that takes the form to either rescind or to amend something previously adopted. 8 can be reconsidered. See, however, standard characteristic 8 of the motion that takes the form either to rescind or to amend something previously adopted, 35.2.8, with reference to the adoption of bylaws. See final sentence of 54.20 and 57.1.3. The framing of main motions. Wording of a main motion. If a main motion is adopted, it becomes the officially recorded statement of an action taken by the Assembly. A motion should therefore be worded in a concise, unambiguous, and complete form appropriate to such a purpose. It cannot employ language that is not allowed in debate, Chapter 43. A member making a motion embodying something that has just been said by the chair or another member in informal consultation during a meeting should avoid statements such as "I so move," and should himself recite the complete motion that he offers. Motions to reaffirm a position previously taken by adopting a motion or resolution are not in order. Such a motion serves no useful purpose because the original motion is still in effect. Also, possible attempts to amend a motion to reaffirm would come into conflict with the rules for the motion to amend something previously adopted, Chapter 35, and if such a motion to reaffirm failed, it would create an ambiguous situation. A motion whose only effect is to propose that the Assembly refrain from doing something should not be offered if the same result can be accomplished by offering no motion at all. It is incorrect, for example, to move that no response be made to a request for contribution to a fund, or that our delegates be given no instructions, unless some purpose would be served by adoption of such a motion. This could be the case, for example, if the membership of an organization wishes to make certain that a subordinate body, such as its executive board, will not take action at a later date, or if the motion expresses an opinion or reason as to why no action should be taken. It is preferable to avoid a motion containing a negative statement, even in cases where the effect of the motion is to propose that something be done, since members may become confused as to the effect of voting for or against such a motion. Rather than moving, for example, that the association go on record as not in favor of the proposed public bond issue, it should be moved that the association oppose or declare its opposition to the bond issue. In this connection, it should be noted that voting down a motion or resolution that would express a particular opinion is not the same as adopting a motion expressing the opposite opinion, since, if the motion is voted down, neither opinion has been expressed. A member may be in complete agreement with the views contained in such a resolution, yet feel that his organization should not speak out on the matter, and he might therefore vote against the resolution. Motions submitted in writing, or resolutions. As previously stated, a main motion, particularly an original main motion, is frequently offered as a resolution, either because of its importance or because of its length or complexity. Any resolution, and any long or complicated motion, whether cast as a resolution or not, should always be submitted in writing as described in 4.5. In preparing an important written motion or resolution, which should be done in advance of the meeting if possible, it is often advisable to consult with members who can be of assistance in perfecting it, and also with those whose support is likely to be necessary for its adoption. If such a motion is not offered as a resolution, it can simply be written out in the form in which it would be moved orally, beginning with the word "that." For example, that the Merchants Association sponsor an essay contest open to high school students of the city to be conducted according to the following specifications. If put in the form of a resolution, the preceding example would be written, "Resolved that the Merchants Association sponsor an essay contest." In a resolution, the name of the adopting organization can also be made a part of the enacting words, such as "Resolved by the International Benevolent Association and Convention assembled that." The form in which a main motion is written does not determine in any way, but must be referred to a resolutions committee, nor does it affect the form of the motions reported by such committee. See, for example, Platform 5976-77. An example of a simple resolution expressing an opinion or position of an organized society is given in 10.3. If the resolution is offered in a mass meeting, or in any meeting where there is no established organization whose act the adopted resolution would become, it may begin, "Resolved that it is the sense of this meeting that." A resolution can consist of more than one resolving clause, as in the following example. Resolved that it is the sense of this meeting that the existing zoning ordinance should undergo a general revision, and resolved that the secretary be requested to send a copy of this resolution and of the report already presented at this meeting to the mayor and to each member of the city council. Use of a preamble. It is usually inadvisable to attempt to include reasons for motion adoptions within the motion itself. To do so may encumber the motion and may weigh against its adoption, since some members who approve of the action it proposes may dislike voting for it if it states reasons with which they disagree. When special circumstances make it desirable to include a brief statement of background, the motion should be cast in the form of a resolution, with the background or reasons incorporated in a preamble that is placed before the resolving clauses. A preamble consists of one or more clauses beginning "whereas." It should be emphasized that neither rule nor custom requires a resolution to have a preamble, and one should not be used merely for the sake of form. In general, the use of a preamble should be limited to cases where it provides little known information without which the point of the merits of a resolution are likely to be poorly understood, where unusual importance is attached to making certain responses for an action a matter of record, or the like. An example of a resolution with an appropriate preamble might be the following. Whereas a privately conducted survey by experts engaged by the association reveals conditions constituting a serious fire hazard throughout the lower office building area bordering the waterfront, resolved that a committee of 7 consisting of names of 4 and 3 others to be named by the chair be appointed to draw up recommendations or by the association may bring to bear all possible influence to secure proper enforcement of city fire regulations and any revision of them that may be found to be appropriate. To avoid detracting from the force of the resolution itself, a preamble generally should contain no more clauses than are strictly necessary. In cases where an elaborate resolution, consisting of several preamble clauses and several resolving clauses, cannot be avoided, however, the following skeleton example will serve as a guide. Whereas the text of the first preamble clause, whereas text of the next to the last preamble clause, and whereas text of the last preamble clause, resolved that stating action to be taken, resolved that stating further action to be taken, and resolved that stating still further action to be taken. In the consideration of a resolution having a preamble, the preamble is always amended last, since changes in the resolving clauses may require changes in the preamble. In moving the adoption of a resolution, the preamble is not usually mentioned, since it is included in the resolution. When the previous question is ordered on the resolution before the preamble has been considered for amendment, however, the previous question does not apply to the preamble, which becomes open to debate and amendment unless the previous question is then separately ordered on it also. Details of form and variations in resolutions. The following details regarding the usual form for writing resolutions and the variations that are used should be noted. If there is a preamble, each clause written as a separate paragraph begins with the word whereas, followed by a comma, and the next word should begin with a capital letter. The preamble, regardless of how many paragraphs it has, should never contain a period. Each of its paragraphs should close with a semicolon, followed, in the case of the next last paragraph, by the word and, which is optional for the preceding paragraphs also. The last paragraph of the preamble should close with a semicolon, after which connecting expressions such as therefore, or therefore be it, or now therefore be it is sometimes added. When one of these phrases is included, no punctuation should follow it, and it should always be placed at the end of the preamble paragraph, never at the beginning of the resolving paragraph. Thus, whereas the text of the preamble, now therefore be it resolved that stating action to be taken. A resolution is often more forceful with a minimum of connecting words, however, as in the earlier examples above. The word resolved is underlined or printed in italics and is followed by a comma in the word that, which begins with a capital T. If there is more than one resolving clause, each of them should be a separate paragraph. Unless the paragraphs are numbered as in the alternative form described below, each paragraph begins with the words resolved that, just as the first resolving clause. Each resolving paragraph may close with a semicolon, followed by the word and, at least in the case of the next to last, and in the example already shown, or each resolving paragraph may end with a period. A resolving paragraph should not contain a period within its structure, though observance of this rule is becoming less strict. As an alternative form, separate paragraphs, except the first, may be numbered and begin with the word that, as follows: resolved that, 2 that, 3 that, etc. For the format used in the platform, see 5976 through 77. Orders, instructions to employees. In organizations with employees, the assembly or the board can give instructions to an employee in the form of an order, which is written just as a resolution, except that the word ordered is used in place of the word resolved. An example would be ordered that the steward obtain impoundment of all unauthorized vehicles found parked on the club premises. Series of resolutions offered by a single main motion. If a single composite proposal for taking a number of actions in reference to a particular subject has too many elements to be conveniently written into one resolution, even if several clauses, it can be set forth in a series of separate resolutions that can be numbered and offered by means of a single main motion. Thus, Mr. President, I move the adoption of, or I offer, the following resolutions. Such a series of resolutions can include orders as described above. In the case of a series of resolutions relating to a single subject, if members desire one or more of the resolutions to be considered separately, the motion for division of a question, Chapter 27, must be made and adopted by a majority vote. Sometimes a series of independent resolutions relating to completely different subjects is offered by a single main motion in the same way. In the latter case, where the subjects are independent, any resolution in the series must be taken up and voted on separately at the demand of a single member. Such a demand can be made even when another has the floor, at any time until the vote has been taken on adopting the series. A member wishing to make this demand rises and says, for example, Mr. President, I call for a separate vote on resolution number 2. Main motions that are not in order. Below are stated a number of characteristics or conditions that cause a particular main motion to be out of order, and, where applicable, the alternative courses that are open for accomplishing the desired result. 1. No main motion is in order that conflicts with the corporate charter, constitution, or bylaws. Note: however, an incidental main motion that conflicts with the provision in the nature of a rule of order in the bylaws or constitution is in order provided that A. the motion has no continuing force and effect beyond the current session, and B. the provision that it conflicts with is one that can be suspended. Such a motion is, in effect, an incidental main motion to suspend the rules, and the vote required for its adoption is the same as the corresponding incidental motion, Chapter 25, that is, it usually requires a 2/3 vote. See 623, 2527, and 257 through 14. For example, it is in order by a 2/3 vote to adopt an agenda for the current session that differs from an order of business set forth in the bylaws. Back to reading. Although a main motion to amend them may be in order, see chapters 35 and 57. And to the extent the procedural rules applicable to the organization or assembly are prescribed by federal, state, or local law, no main motion is in order that conflicts with such rules. 2. A main motion that proposes action outside the scope of the organization's object as defined in the corporate charter, constitution, or bylaws is not in order unless the assembly by a 2/3 vote authorizes its introduction. If a member offers such a main motion, the chair can put to the assembly the question whether it shall be considered, or if the chair rules the motion out of order, any member can move to authorize its introduction. This question is neither debatable nor amendable. If a 2/3 vote is not obtained, the main motion cannot be introduced that session unless the vote on authorizing its introduction is reconsidered, but it can be authorized at any later session. An affirmative vote on authorizing its introduction cannot be reconsidered. 3. No main motion is in order that presents substantially the same question as a motion that was finally disposed of earlier in the same session by being rejected, postponed indefinitely, Chapter 11, or subjected to an objection to the consideration of a question, Chapter 26, that was sustained. A main motion that was thus disposed of can, however, be renewed, Chapter 38. That is, the same question can be introduced again as if new at any later session, or a motion to reconsider the vote that disposed of it can be made for a limited time during the same session. And if such a motion to reconsider, Chapter 37, is adopted, the previously disposed of main motion will thereby become pending. Note: upon the reconsideration of a vote that postponed a main motion indefinitely, both the main motion and the motion to postpone indefinitely will become pending, the motion to postpone indefinitely becoming the immediately pending question. Back to reading. 4. Apart from a motion to rescind or to amend something previously adopted, Chapter 35, no main motion is in order that conflicts with the motion previously adopted at any time and still in force. Note: unless an adopted main motion specifies a time for the termination of its effect, it continues in force until it is rescinded. Back to reading. If a main motion that interferes with the desired action has been adopted, a motion to reconsider, Chapter 37, the vote on it can be made for a limited time during the same session, and if it is reconsidered, it can be voted down or amended as desired in the reconsideration. Although reconsideration is the preferable procedure in such a case when possible, an adopted main motion at any time before or after it is too late to reconsider it can be changed by the means of the motion to amend something previously adopted, or it can be rescinded and the desired new motion can then be introduced. 5. No main motion is in order that would conflict with or that prevents substantially the same question as one which has been temporarily but not finally disposed of, whether in the same or an earlier session, and which remains within the control of the assembly. See 9-7 through 11 and 38-8. If a motion that has been temporarily disposed of interferes with the desired introduction of another main motion, it can be brought before the assembly again, at which point the earlier motion can possibly be amended to encompass the idea of the desired new motion as follows. A. If it is in the hands of a committee, the committee can be discharged from further consideration of the question, or the vote that referred it to the committee can be reconsidered, so long as such reconsideration is permissible and reversed. See chapters 13, 36, and 37. B. If it is due to come up at a later time or at a later point in the order of business as a general order, a special order, or unfinished business, the rules can be suspended and it can be taken up out of its proper order, or any intervening items of business can be individually laid on the table or postponed as they arise, or the vote that established a general order or special order can be reconsidered, so long as such reconsideration is permissible and reversed. See Chapter 41, especially 4137 through 39. C. If it lies on the table, it can be taken from the table. See Chapters 17 and 34. D. If it is the subject of a motion to reconsider, Chapter 37, that has been made but not finally disposed of, the motion to reconsider can be adopted. Note: rejection of the motion to reconsider will not cause the main motion to be brought before the Assembly again, but will cause the vote that previously disposed of the main motion to become final. Back to reading. Such a motion to reconsider, if it is not already pending, can be brought before the Assembly for this purpose as follows. 1. If it has not yet been taken up, it can be called up by any member when another question is pending. Or 2. If it has been taken up and temporarily disposed of, it can be brought before the Assembly again by whichever of the processes mentioned in B or C above is applicable. Many of the alternative courses for obtaining a result that cannot be directly reached through a main motion, as described above, involve parliamentary motions having special requirements, such as a 2/3 vote or previous notice, 1044 through 51, for their adoption. The rules relating to the motions to suspend the rules, Chapter 25, take from the table, Chapter 34, rescind or amend something previously adopted, Chapter 35, discharge a committee, Chapter 36, and reconsider, Chapter 37, and the rules relating to the renewal of motions, Chapter 38, should be read in connection with the application of these methods. Treatment of main motions. The basic procedure by which main motions are introduced and considered is described in detail in Chapter 4. Additional points to be noted in connection with the handling of main motions are as follows. Procedures by which the proposal contained in a main motion can be approved upon before action is taken. As previously noted, 4.7 through 8, it is a general parliamentary rule that a subject must be brought up in the form of a motion embodying a specific proposal before it can be discussed in a meeting of an assembly. A motion should be as well thought out as possible before it is introduced. At the same time, it will frequently happen that the assembly, although desiring to take some kind of action on the subject that a main motion has brought to its attention, wishes to make some change in the proposal before voting on its adoption. There are several means by which such a result can be accomplished, depending on the conditions and the degree or scope of the change is desired. The courses that are open in such cases are summarized below. 1. After a main motion has been made and before the question has been said by the chair, any member can quickly rise and, with little or no explanatory comment, informally suggest one or more modifications in the motion, which at this point the maker can accept or reject as he wishes. See 420 through 22. Application of this method should generally be limited to minor changes about which there is unlikely to be a difference of opinion. 2. After the question has been said by the chair, although the assembly and not the maker of the motion then has control over its wording, the maker can request unanimous consent to modify the motion. See 3311 through 19. If any member then objects, however, the desired modification must be introduced in the form of a motion to amend, as noted below. 3. By means of the subsidiary motion to amend, Chapter 12, members can propose changes to be made in the wording and, within limits, the meaning of a pending motion before it is voted on. These amendments must be seconded, are debatable, and are adopted by a majority vote. Such proposal amendments can take the form of either A. Change the particular words of paragraph in the main motion, of which several specific types are permitted under the rules for the motion to amend, or B. A motion to substitute an entire new text in the main motion in place of the pending version. See 1269 through 90. Whatever amendments are adopted, the main motion is then voted on in its amended form. 4. If proper recasting of a main motion will require time or study, the subsidiary motion to commit, Chapter 13, which is adopted by a majority vote, can be used to refer the main motion to a committee. When this committee reports, it normally recommends appropriate amendments for the Assembly's consideration. Such a committee can be a special committee, appointed only for the particular case, or it can be one of a number of standing committees that may be permanently established in the rules of the organization. See Chapter 50. Some assemblies provide in the rules for the automatic referral of all main motions dealing with certain classes of subjects to specified standing committees as soon as they are introduced. Bills are handled in this manner in most legislative bodies. In conventions, the rules of the organization often require that all resolutions not reviewed by some other committee be submitted to a resolutions committee before coming before the general voting body. See 5967 through 71. Where an assembly is large and has a volume of business, it is usually desirable to have every main question go to a committee before final action is taken. 5. If the general problem posed by a main motion might be better dealt with by an alternative measure that cannot conveniently be proposed as an amendment in the form of a substitute, see above, a member speaking in debate can urge rejection of the pending main motion, saying that if it is voted down, he will offer a different main motion, which he can describe briefly and which deals with the general problem in a substantially different way. See 1026.3. Or, with the same explanation, he may move to postpone the motion indefinitely, Chapter 11. If the pending motion is thereafter voted down or indefinitely postponed, the chair immediately recognizes the member again for the purpose of making his alternative motion, even if another member rises to claim before first and addresses the chair. Introduction of subsidiary or incidental motions as a part of, or privileged motions as an interruption of the consideration of a main motion. While a main motion is pending as described in Chapters 5 and 6, one or more subsidiary motions or incidental motions can be introduced and disposed of as an integral part of the main motion's consideration, or the introduction of one or more privileged motions can interrupt its consideration. A member may speak in debate on the main motion and conclude by offering a secondary motion. Such motions are usually made during the period while the main motion is open to debate, although certain incidental motions can also arise before or after this stage in its handling. The precise times and circumstances when each of these motions is in order are determined by the first three of the motion's standard descriptive characteristics. If the Assembly's treatment of a particular main motion involves a number of these other motions, they may occur in such a way that each one of them is disposed of before the next is introduced, or, depending on the circumstances, several of them may become pending at one time by operation of the order of precedence of motions. See 5.3 through 13. In the latter case, when a motion that takes precedence over all pending questions is made, that motion is disposed of first, and then the question recurs on the next most recently moved motion. That is, as far as applicable in the existing parliamentary situation, its consideration is resumed at the point when the higher-ranking motion interrupted it. This motion is again open to debate and amendment if it is a debatable and amendable motion. In this manner, the motions in the series of pending questions are voted on in the reverse of the order in which they were made, with the main motion being voted on last, unless the result of the vote on one of the other motions causes consideration of the remainder of the series to be halted. This principle may be illustrated by a somewhat more complicated example than may ordinarily occur in practice. Before referring to the explanation of subsidiary privileged and incidental motions in 6, assume that the following series of motions is pending and that the motions have been moved in the order shown. 1. A main motion. 2. A motion to postpone the main question indefinitely. 3. An amendment to the main motion. 4. A motion to refer the main question with the pending amendment to a committee. 5. A motion to postpone the pending question to a certain time. 6. A motion to vote on the postponement by ballot. 7. A motion to lay the pending question on the table. And 8. A motion to take a recess. In such a case, the motion to recess is voted on first, then the motion to lay on the table, and so on, proceeding upward through the list above. If any one of the motions 8, 7, 5, 4, or 2 is adopted, however, consideration of the remaining motions stopped. These processes, and others that may be employed in or interrupt a main question's consideration, are explained initially in Chapter 6 and are further illustrated in examples in Chapters 11 through 33. A subsidiary or incidental motion adheres to a main question if it is related to the main question in such a way that, once introduced, it must be decided before the main question can be decided. Adhering motions thus remain connected with the main question that if that question is interrupted or temporarily disposed of, and remain to be decided first if and when the main question is taken up again. In the example in the preceding paragraph, motions 2 through 7 adhere to the main motion, except that motion 2 to postpone indefinitely would cease to adhere to it if motion 4 to commit were adopted. See standard descriptive characteristic 2.10.8. Motion 8 in the example does not adhere to the main question. Main motions brought up by means of a call for the orders of the day or by raising a question of privilege. Under the process by which a main motion is normally introduced, as already explained, it can be moved only while no motion is pending. Certain questions may come before the Assembly with the status of main motions after having interrupted other business, however, if they are brought up by means of either of the two lowest-ranking privileged motions. To call for the orders of the day, Chapter 18, and to raise a question of privilege, Chapter 19, each have privileged rank and can therefore interrupt pending business. As a result of the application of one of these devices to interrupt a pending question in order of the day, that is, another question previously set as due to come up automatically at the time, may be taken up, or an urgent motion relating to the privileges of the Assembly or of a member may be admired as a question of privilege to be entertained immediately. But when such an order of the day or question of privilege has thus become pending, it is treated exactly as any other main motion. The description of the first two privileged motions in 6.12 and the sections on them referred to above should be read in connection with this paragraph. Notes on example format throughout the book. Below for the main motion, and in each of the succeeding sections covering the different motions of parliamentary law, chapters 11 through 37, is a subsection headed Form and Example, giving a script showing the words to be spoken by a member making the motion by the chair and stating and putting the question on it. In these subsections and throughout this book as applicable, the following methods of notation are used. The examples generally show the presiding officer addresses Mr. President or Madam President. While this form corresponds to the chair's designation in most organized societies, the presiding officer should be addressed by whatever his or her official title in the particular organization or the assembly is. Where he or she has no special title, or in a meeting of an unorganized body such as a mass meeting, the form Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman should be used. See also 3:10 through 12. The phrase obtaining the floor in parentheses before words spoken by a member indicates that this member must first obtain the floor in the manner explained in 3:30 through 35. The word second in parentheses after words spoken in making a motion indicates that, except in cases where it is proposed on behalf of the board or committee, another member must second the motion as described in 4:9 through 14, and that it is assumed that this is done. Form and example. The example below illustrates the handling of a main motion in a case that involves only the basic forms of the 6 principal steps. 3 in bringing the motion before the assembly, 4:2, and 3 in its consideration, 4:25. Assume that the chair has just asked if there is any new business, see 41:27. Member A, obtaining the floor. I move that the society contribute $100 to the centennial celebration. Second. It is moved and seconded that the society contribute $100 to the centennial celebration. The chair then proceeds as shown in 4:15. The chair immediately turns toward Member A, who resumed his seat after making his motion, to see if he wishes the first floor in debate. 3:33:1. Assume Member A is already rising to claim the floor. The chair recognizes him. Mr. A. Member A explains the reasons why the contribution should be made, followed by others who also speak in debate after having obtained the floor. When debate appears to have ended, the chair makes sure that no one else wishes to speak as by asking, "Are you ready for the question?" or "Is there any further debate?" and then puts the question, that is, puts the motion to a vote, as follows. The question is on the motion that the society contribute $100 to the centennial celebration. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Pause for response. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it and the motion is agreed to. The treasurer will issue the appropriate check and the secretary will prepare a covering letter forwarding the contribution to the chairman of the Centennial Commission. Is there further new business? If the assembly is taking up business under the heading of special orders in the order of business, or that of unfinished business in general orders, rather than new business in the above example, the chair, instead of saying, "Is there further new business?" announces, "The next item of business is," and then immediately proceeds to state the question. See 41:19 through 26. See Chapter 4 for variations in the steps illustrated above. For examples of the use of subsidiary and incidental motions in the handling of main motions and the application of privileged motions while a main motion is pending, see chapters 11 through 33. Previous notice of motions. The term previous notice, or notice, as applied to necessary conditions for the adoption of certain motions, has a particular meaning in parliamentary law. A requirement of previous notice means that that the motion will be introduced, indicating its exact content as described below, must be included in the call of the meeting, 1:7 and 9:2 through 5, at which the motion will be brought up, or as a permissible alternative, if no more than a quarterly time interval, see 9:7, will have elapsed since the preceding meeting, the announcement must be made at the preceding meeting. Motions that have the effect of changing or nullifying previous action of the assembly, such as the motion to rescind or to amend something previously adopted, chapter 35, the motion to discharge committee, chapter 36, or a motion to postpone an event already scheduled, require previous notice if they are to be adopted by only a majority vote. Accordingly, it is ordinarily desirable to give previous notice if there is a possibility of serious disagreements. The adoption or amendment in a special rule of order, The adoption or amendment of special rules of order requires either A, previous notice and a 2/3 vote, or B, a vote of a majority of the entire membership, as does the amendment of bylaws if they do not prescribe the procedure for their amendment, which they should do. See also Table of Rules relating to motions, pages T6 through T33. Bylaws or special rules of order sometimes also provide a requirement of notice for original main motions dealing with certain subjects. Compare Standard Characteristics 7A, 10.8. Subject to any rules of the organization that provide how notice shall be given, it can be given as follows. If previous notice is given at a meeting, it can be given orally unless the rules of the organization require it to be in writing, which is often the case with the notice of amendments to the bylaws. Unless the rules require the full text of the motion, resolution, or bylaw amendment to be submitted in the notice, only the purport need be indicated. But such a statement to purport must be accurate and complete, as in to raise the annual dues to $20, since it will determine what amendments are in order when the motion is considered. The notice becomes invalid if the motion is amended beyond the scope of the notice. See also chapters 35 and 57. When no question is pending, a member desiring to give a notice is entitled to preference and recognition. But see 42.6 through 13 for circumstances in which others may have a higher priority for such preference. But if the member wishing to give the notice is unable to obtain the floor while no business is pending, as may sometimes happen, for example, in a convention that is following an adopted gender program, Chapter 41, or in cases where a meeting of an ordinary society adjourns before completing its regular order of business, the notice, if necessary, can interrupt pending business or any other pending motion. The notice is also in order when another person has been assigned the floor but has not yet begun to speak, and is in order even after it has been voted to adjourn, provided that the chair has not yet declared the meeting adjourned. See also 2110 through 12. A notice can be given and taken note of in a meeting as follows. Member A obtained the floor. I give notice that at the next meeting I will move to rescind the resolution adopted April 17th, 2025 relating to Chair. Notice has been given at the next meeting, and then repeating the substance of the notice. The secretary then records the notice in the minutes. If the member desiring to give the notice is unable to obtain the floor, the following variations of form can be used as appropriate to the case. Member A rising and addressing the chair immediately after the chair has recognized another member, Mr. Y, and before the latter has begun to speak, or remaining standing if he has just sought the floor unsuccessfully. Mr. President! Chair. For what purpose does the member rise? Or, if member A has remained standing after seating the floor, for what purpose does the member adjust the chair? I wish to give notice of the following amendment to the bylaws. To amend Article 2, Section 3 by... Chair. Notice has been given of the following amendment to the bylaws. Mr. Y has the floor. Instead of being given at a meeting, a notice can also be sent to every member with the call of the meeting at which the matter is to come up for action, in cases where there is a duty or established custom of issuing such a call. In such cases, the member desiring to give the notice writes to the secretary alone, requesting that the notice be sent with the call of the next meeting, and the secretary then does this at the expense of the society. Motions to adopt and motion to ratify. A motion to adopt or accept or agree to an officer's or committee's report or recommendations to the assembly by means of a main motion directed the officer or committee to prepare as an incidental main motion. A motion to adopt or accept a report or the recommendations of a standing committee prepared on the committee's own initiative and dealing with the subject that was not expressly referred to the committee, however, is an original main motion. A motion to adopt a resolution, bylaws, or any other document can be amended by adding, and that it be printed and that members be furnished with copies, or that it or they go into effect at the close of this annual meeting, or anything of a similar nature. See also Chapter 51 for the adoption of bylaws, see 54:15 through 20, and 56:15. The motion to ratify, also called approve or confirm, is an incidental motion that is used to confirm or make valid an action already taken that cannot become valid until approved by the assembly. Cases where the procedure of ratification is applicable include action improperly taken at a regular or properly called meeting at which no quorum was present, see 46 through 10, action taken at a special meeting with regard to business not mentioned in the call of that meeting, see 9:15 through 16, action taken by officers, committees, delegates, subordinate bodies, or staff in excess of their instructions or authority, including action to carry out decisions made without a valid meeting, such as by approval obtained separately from all board members, 49:16, or any electronic meeting, 9:30 through 36, of a body for which such meetings are not authorized. Action taken by a local unit that requires approval of the state or national organization, or action taken by a state or national society subject to approval by its constituent units. An assembly can ratify only such actions of its officers, committees, delegates, subordinate bodies, or staff as it would have had the right to authorize in advance. It cannot make valid a voice vote election when the bylaws require elections to be by ballot, nor can it ratify anything done in violation of procedural rules prescribed by national, state, or local law, or in violation of its own bylaws, except that provision for a quorum in the bylaws does not prevent it from ratifying action taken at a meeting when no quorum was present. A motion to ratify can be amended by substituting a motion of censure, and vice versa, when the action involved has been taken by an officer or other representative of the assembly. Since the motion to ratify or to censure is a main motion, it is debatable and opens the entire question to debate.